I came out officially when I was 24 years old. I was living in Cincinnati, and it was just sort of a spontaneous thing with me. There was no seminal event that brought me out or any one person. It's just that I always knew that I was gay since I was a young child, and finally just couldn't put up with the loneliness and shame anymore, and decided to officially put myself out there as being a young gay man. It was very difficult. I had no role models was the worst thing. You know, I had no one to look up to, no one who I even knew was gay. And even though, as it turned out, my best friend with whom I grew up wound up being gay, and he came out a couple of years before I did. He actually went to Chicago to study architecture, and he came out while he was in college as well. Actually, I wasn't in college, I was in medical school when I came out. But yeah, the worst part was not knowing anyone who was gay and feeling like I was the only one in the world, and being very afraid of that. And I grew up in a very, very strict religious Catholic family. And of course, any mention of being gay meant that you were going to hell. And so when I was a kid, I was sure that I was going to go to hell, you know, for my thoughts and passions and desires. And it was very tough. It was very tough. I got ridiculed a lot as a child because I threw a ball like a girl, and you know, I got made fun of a lot, and I didn't really quite understand why, you know, but other people obviously picked up on my, I guess you could say, feminine ways, even though I was never really a very feminine person. But I guess people picked up on that, kids in school, and it was very difficult. I felt very bad about myself. I felt very bad about myself.
And how do you feel now?
Now I'm very proud to be a gay man. In fact, I think I'm lucky because it has challenged me to question the norms, you know, and it's interesting because being different makes you think about yourself critically and find the pride in yourself that is there and that you deserve, you know? Well, I am a physician, and interesting things happened when the AIDS epidemic started. I went to a conference. I got something in the mail, or I saw somewhere that there was a meeting in Asilomar, which is a conference center south of here, and for gay physicians. And up until that time, I was sure I was the only gay doctor in the world. I mean, I was very cautious around the hospital and always very self-conscious about it. And so that conference was only 12, it was all 12 men at the time. And out of that conference led the beginning of what was known as AFR, the American Association of Physicians for Human Rights. We were afraid to say we were a gay organization at the time. And so I was one of the 12 founding fathers of that group. That group is now a national group with several thousand members, physicians and medical students, and is a very active organization called GLAMA, Gay and Lesbian Medical Association. We eventually decided to change our name to actually include gay and lesbian in the name of our organization. So I was fairly new in practice when I went to a conference that was about the epidemic that seemed to be appearing and among gay men. And no one really knew what that was about. We didn't know the cause for it. We didn't know the epidemiology of it. We didn't really understand anything, but just knowing that gay men were getting ill, developing Kaposi sarcoma, and dying. And so I remember at one conference, there was a talk about possible causes, and one of the things that he purported was that it was related to use of poppers in gay clubs and dance floors, and all sorts of theories were floating around. And so I had the opportunity to grow through and watch and carry out the very beginnings of the diagnostic criteria, the causes rather, of AIDS. And I remember when Dr. Anthony Fauci from the Centers for Disease Control came up with the HIV virus. And, at first it was called the gay plague, and it had all different sorts of names until eventually it was identified as being AIDS. So that was a very, very interesting and enlightening time of my life. Yeah, my very best friend, whom I mentioned, who moved to Chicago, passed away from AIDS, and that was very difficult for me. And I had other friends in Cincinnati who developed symptoms, and I recall rather sadly 3 different people who came to me requesting that I prescribe enough medication for them to kill themselves, because at that time it was considered a death sentence, and there was a lot of discrimination against people with AIDS. And so they understandably felt that death was better than going through all of that. It was very sad. Oh, I'm incredibly proud about it. The improvements that we've seen as far as the care of people with AIDS has been fascinating. I previously was a volunteer at the Marin AIDS Project, Marin being a county just north of San Francisco. And I was a volunteer there for 11 years and eventually wound up on the board of directors. And we saw the treatment of AIDS progress over those years. And we ran a clinic and a testing facility. And that made me feel very good to be part of that. And right now I'm retired, actually disabled because of some spine problems. But I'm doing volunteer work at Open House, which is where we met, and which is a program, a center for senior LGBTQ people that runs a housing facility, as well as a lot of different activities and support groups. And I'm also very proud to be part of that program because the need is so strong. And we have such a such a demand for our services. So there I work as a receptionist, and then I also am a volunteer who goes out to meet with people who are shut-ins, who are not necessarily have AIDS, but are senior people who just can't get out and about. And it's just for socializing, you know, to go and talk with them and share stories and hopefully, you know, bring a smile to their faces every now and then. Yeah, well, luckily, a lot of them don't need a lot of encouragement because people are coming out early, and there are a lot of role models. They hear and see gay people and understand that it's okay. You know, I don't really work with youth very much, but I have had opportunities of young guys who were struggling with coming out, and I think sharing my stories of how I developed pride in myself hopefully is encouraging to them, you know, to identify what they need to be proud of. And so that's been a lot of fun and interesting.
Yes, thank you so much.
Sure.